when this really happened, I really thought that God had judged me and found me wanting, and that God had abandoned me. And I was like that for months.
I would go in the woods and I would so yell at God. The words that would come out of my mouth were not pretty, especially for a pastor's wife. Not pretty at all. But you know what? Nobody was there. It was just God and me, and God knew how I was feeling. He knew. And I had a lot of anger issues. And to be perfectly honest, and again, it is who God created me to be, but I mourned. I'm not sure what I mourned more, Lisa, the loss of my ministry. And to me, my ministry was stolen from me because of my husband's addiction. So I had a lot of anger with the fact that I so invested years and years and years into my church, gone.
I really doubted my own relationship with God. Like I really doubted hearing the Holy Spirit. And so therefore, over time, I started to get really angry at myself, which then therefore, because I got angry at myself because I didn't listen, I then started to get angry at God that I was actually in this position, that I'd made a decision to marry a man that, had a sexual addiction. And then I got to the point where, well, God, you know what? Like, I feel like you don't care about me anymore, because I'm crying out that, my husband would change, that he would start to be transparent, that he would actually make the steps of being accountable. So I was asking God all of this stuff all along, and I just felt like he wasn't there, he wasn't listening. And so I remember one particular night, and it was a horrific time, and my husband ended up going for a walk because we got into a bit of an argument. And when we went for the walk, when he went for the walk, I didn't know, but he was actually, peeping through another woman's window that had her blinds open and was watching her get undressed. And when he came back, I could just feel something yet again. And so, I ended up getting extremely upset because I could feel that something had happened. And it took, quite a few hours for him to actually confess that, yes, he actually was, looking at someone, and that he couldn't stop doing things like that because he just enjoyed it. And so for me, I just remember after, crying and screaming and, being so upset that he would deceive me like that, I remember crying out to God and just saying, you know what, God, I've just had enough. I'm just so sick of it. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. I don't want anything to do with you, Father, Holy Spirit, or Jesus. I've had enough.
I had to call our assistant up to the house. And he was, of course, in shock. And I remember there I am trying to be the professional pastor's wife and sharing what had just literally happened an hour before, with my house still a mess, my 2 boys in total shock, and knowing I had to tell my 2 older kids who weren't living at the house at the time. And I remember the poor pastor kept saying, "How could your husband do this to me? I'm retired. I don't want to take over the church." And I remember probably for the first time feeling so angry that I was feeling very invisible, that this was about him. And I think it was a good lesson for me, because in the 11 years I've been walking this, I hear this a lot, that we as wives can go through such trauma, but it's not about us. It's about our husbands. It's about what others are feeling. And we become the invisible, person who is carrying the burden of keeping the family together and trying to minimize the consequences of everybody, especially those of us in ministry, protecting the church.
But I really just didn't want to go to church for, one reason was the judgment, and the other reason was because I was traumatized all the time, and because I just wasn't getting the support that I needed. All I needed was someone to sit beside me and say, "I love you, and I care about you, and you're validated." But I never had that, and that's when I actually separated myself and actually searched, on the internet for help. I searched, to so many different websites, just looking for some form of help and just someone who actually understood. I was just yearning for someone to say, "I understand what you're going through, Amanda, and you're not alone." And I didn't find that in the church that I was in.
And ironically, a few days later, I was called back to my assistant pastor's home, and they both asked me to not come to church anymore because the church loved me and they needed to establish themselves as leaders. And so now I didn't just lose my marriage as I knew it. I wasn't sure if my kids were going to survive this, honestly. And I didn't even know if my job working at a public school, right, I was going to have a job. And so forget about finances. And then I didn't even now have my own spiritual family. I had no support. And we had to move because we couldn't afford our home anymore because my husband lost his job and he was in prison. And anyways, it was just a very, very lonely journey that I went through. and we have a hierarchy in the church, and there is spiritual abuse on women. And I'm saying this and I'm in tears. My heart hurts right now. Because I really do believe that it grieves God's heart. I so believe it. And it is shocking. And I'll just use me as an example. The things that pastors have said to me over the course of this healing, that, you know, we women are frigid, that if we would just wear sexier lingerie, that if we would, you know, have showers with our husbands so that they wouldn't act out. It is horrific.